Welcome, everyone, to Women on the Military podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about ROTC, and I forgot to do the introduction when I asked Silver these questions. So, Silver was back on the podcast a few months ago, and now she's back again. She is a ROTC instructor for Army ROTC, and she shares a little bit about her experience of what it means to be an ROTC instructor and some of the advice that she would like to pass on to the cadets. So it'll be a short interview this week, and I'm excited to get started. So welcome to the show, and let's get started with a quick interview with Silver. So you kind of gave advice, but what advice would you give someone who's considering joining the military, and how should they find out about joining through ROTC?
So there's a couple things. Obviously, if you are thinking about becoming an officer, right, you have those natural leadership tendencies. You've been in leadership positions throughout your life, or maybe you haven't, but it's something that you think you want to try. One, I would look at your different commissioning options before even considering ROTC. Look and see if something like officer candidate school is more right for you, just enlisting and going to federal OCS. Maybe you already have a degree and you want to join a National Guard and go through their state OCS program. Maybe you don't have a degree and you want school to get paid for. ROTC seems right for you. Maybe the academy seems right? There's lots of different commissioning options. Once you've settled and looked and decided that ROTC is the right fit, you want a better or a different work-life balance, you want to get your degree, you want to experience college, but come out with a full paying job on the backside, then I would just tell people to really look at the schools first. Before you commit to an actual school, look at their ROTC program, get tours, call their recruiting officer, look at their social medias. That's a huge one right now in this day and age, is check out the program's social medias. What does it look like? Something that you would feel welcome into? Does it look like a program that has a sense of belonging that really speaks to you? And then go from there. Then start making those calls to decide on the school that you want to go to, because it might not be your number one school academically, but some of the best schools out there don't have the best ROTC programs. And if you get into a good ROTC program, you're going to make that school what it is. Like your time in college is what you make of it. So that's my very step-by-step process. And definitely look at the University of Montana, of course. But no, there's some amazing programs out there. And then there's some that, maybe aren't quite your vibe, don't quite fit your lifestyle, and that's okay too.
I think that's really good advice, to look at the ROTC program and not look at the school and see, does it have ROTC? Instead, learn a little bit about what the ROTC program is, and look at the other options, because you can do officer training school. That's what the Air Force calls it.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know the Air Force.
No, it's okay. OCS, that's what the Army calls it, and I'm sure that Navy and Marines have their own acronyms as well. And then the academies, all the different military academies, and you can enlist and then switch over if that works better for you. So there are a lot of different options, and so that's really important. And then I love that you're with the cadets. What do you see you hear all these negative things about Generation Z doesn't want to join the military, they're not patriotic, they just I'm a millennial, so they used to say all these mean things about millennials, and now I feel like it's just whoever the youngest generation is. What do you see in the kids that you're working with, or the young adults that you're working with in the program? What do you see from them? And if you're thinking of joining, what kind of attributes do you need to have to be successful?
What I see initially is a lot of drive, just a lot of energy with not knowing where to channel that energy, right? It's if they're in college as Gen Z, they're wanting something more. They're wanting something more for themselves, their family, their career, right? They're already in higher education. What I'm seeing as compared to my millennial time is just different learning styles, different attention spans, different forms of communication. Right now we're in 2024. These college students were entering high school during the COVID era. So they were entering kind of that first real time of being on their own, academically, and really having it heightened, and what their standards were heightened during COVID. And they kind of got screwed, if you will, during that time, right? Because so many schools went online. So what I'm seeing is now today's 2024 college students are more apt to learn with interactive, quick, short attention span type learning activities, not sitting there death by PowerPoint, which nobody really learns great death by PowerPoint. But, us millennials, we were better with being able to take notes and pay attention to the slides. Now I need to add animations in. Now I need to add music in the background. Now I need to add more interactive, practical exercise. And I think what people don't realize is that, and this is all of higher education, if you can tap into that specific today's Gen Z learning style, it's so much easier than fighting to make them learn like us millennials did. Like it is, I spent my first semester trying to teach them from the exact USAT curriculum with the Army slides. Here's the task condition standards. And I had people, half of them falling asleep in my class before I had even read the learning objectives. Like it's just not the way that they learn. So now we are up, we are moving around. Today we played this little fun game about hand and arm signals where they made up their own and they were hopping on one foot around the classroom. We're laughing and they're having a good time. And then the other thing I noticed is that they're still learning how to be social. So here we are 4 years later when they were finally given a little bit of freedom in high school, or that's the time, freshman, sophomore, you're given a little bit more freedom. You're more apt to generally start to become more part of social clubs. They didn't have that. It was shut down. And so they're still learning and giving grace to them and understanding that they're still learning how to interact with one another, and learning how to manage their time differently has been a godsend for me. Just being like, you know what? I'm not going to keep fighting and trying to make you learn the way that this organization thinks you should learn. I'm going to teach myself how you learn. And man, life has been so much easier and more fun. It's been so much more fun. So that's why I say, there is a drive there. There's a ton of energy. They want to do the right thing. It's just teaching them what those right things are in a way that works for their brains. That we're going to have to do the same thing with Gen Alpha. They're a whole different feral animal themselves that we're going to have to learn how to teach and bring in. And I think it becomes on us as educators to understand what that learning style is and adjust to it. Just like in leadership, your leadership is an art. You have to adjust your leadership style to those who are following you, because if you try to force them to do it your way, you're going to be met with resistance every single time. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things the military is missing, and like their recruiting, they're having a lot of trouble recruiting right now. And I feel like they're trying to talk to them in something that makes sense to them, the older generation, even older than us millennials.
Yeah.
And the Gen Z is like, it's not computing at all. And I feel like the military keeps like saying, oh, this isn't working. And I'm like, yes, you need to like talk to them, figure out how they're learning, figure out what they're interested. Because it's not that they don't have the drive and they don't want to join. It's that the language and the words that you're using and the bad, there's a lot of bad media stuff that they've seen over the years that also dissuades them. And so how can you shift your focus? And I feel like the military sometimes is not quite on the right page and they don't seem to understand. So I could go on and on about recruitment.
Same.
I'm like, come on, military. It changed my life in so many positive ways that I'm like, I get frustrated when I see the things they're doing to recruit people. And I'm like, I understand why they're not joining. I wouldn't want to join too with like what you're coming out with. And so how can we adapt and change? And like you said, they have all the qualities and the characteristics, and your cadets are so lucky that you're their leader, because you're adapting and changing and meeting them where they're at, and giving them the grace of like going through a pandemic during high school and how that affected not only how they learned but how they socially interacted as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's hugely important. And selfishly, it just helps me sleep better because I'm not fighting it all the time. It's a lot easier for me to shift my mindset than it is to shift 40 people's mindsets. So if the military can figure that out, this is the generation of memes. This is the generation of 10-second, reels on Instagram. You can figure out the social media and then even the day-to-day classroom, just keeping stuff rolling and keeping their attention going, and you'll nail it. But if we still keep sticking with what worked in 2005, 2006, we're not reaching that generation at all.
Yeah, we're so different. Yeah. Is there anything that you see on the horizon that is changing for ROTC? I know that when I went through, like, field training was 28 days, and I know it's a lot shorter now. So, like, what ways has, like, ROTC changed, and do you see anything coming in the horizon?
So I know, on the Army side, I can't speak for Air Force. Where I went, we didn't even have an Air Force ROTC, and we don't have one here either. We're just Army, but the field training is still, it's 35 days, but it's the field itself isn't quite that same. So when I went through, we went through what we called LDAC in JBLM. Now it's Cadet Summer Training or Advanced Camp down in Fort Knox. And that's been there for quite a few years now. It changed soon after I left. It's tough. There's not a lot of change as far as that goes. I think the biggest change that I've recently experienced myself is Master Educator course. It's been around for a while, but there's a huge push right now to get Army instructors, ROTC instructors, to go through Master Educator course through the University of Louisville. And it's, 4 weeks residential there in Louisville, and then you come back and do a semester of clinicals, which then you're just writing a couple papers and you get your master's degree out of it if you continue on to the few other courses. There's a fellowship involved that I'm on right now that can get you another 6 free credits through the Army. And so it's a very inexpensive, true master's from a accredited organization. And so I think as we're pushing more and more instructors through that, the majority of what I've learned about how to teach this age and this generation was started in MEC. I had started some of my own research before, but the amount of knowledge I learned through that program, and I'm still learning through that program, if we can get more and more instructors through that, that's where I see the future of ROTC changing is, I have a YouTube channel that I just recently started where I'm screencasting all of my lessons in case another, God forbid, pandemic happens, or you have cadets that are studying abroad like I have. You have cadets that have time conflicts and can't be in your class. You're a brand new instructor and you have no idea how to teach this because you just came to a program that doesn't have a primary instructor for you to shadow for a semester. USAC is in general very short staffed and getting shorter staffed as time goes on. It seems to be harder to fill those positions. So doing things that are more online, more interactive, more, taking USAC from the 2000s to the 2020s as far as technology goes. I see that kind of in the future, and I'm hoping to be a part of that change as we go. But as far as ROTC goes, I mean, our numbers are going up, as we're starting to generally shift upwards again. So I think that's really great, but a shameless plug, I get nothing for it, for the Master Educator course. I highly recommend it. It has completely changed my entire mindset around teaching and higher education. So yeah,
That
it was
sounds
a
like
really
such a
long-winded
great
answer, but
No, that sounds like such a great resource, and it's so exciting to hear, like, the things that the Army is doing to, like, make changes and to stay the same. There's so many times you're hearing, like, they're making changes and they're not keeping things the same, and it's exciting to hear that the numbers are going up because I mean, that shows that, like, the importance of the work that they're doing and how it is having a positive impact and that I think that when we start speaking the language that the Gen Z needs to hear and not like what you said, like from the 2000s, it'll change because the world's so different. I mean, that was post September 11th. So many of my guests joined because of September 11th, and that had a huge impact. And kids today were not alive or were not old enough to actually remember it. And so that's a huge impact on, changing the shift of where we're going.
yeah,
Is
for
there,
reference, we have one cadet that was alive during September 11th. Everybody else
right?
was born after September 11th, 2001. And we now don't even talk about that in the anti-terrorism class. We talk about the Boston Marathon, and most of my cadets were like 7 years old during that. So they're like, we have to like start implementing
Keep
different things into
moving.
there and
Yeah,
realizing that this is 20 some years later. The reasons for joining are not the same. So you're not going to be able to have the same
right.
message anymore. So
Yeah. I think that's a really good, like, to show how different the world is. It's like, yeah, only one of them was alive, and that's not he wasn't alive and remembering, or he or she. And so it's
no.
like, yeah, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, the boss that happened a long time ago too."
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. apparently time keeps passing. So that's really interesting. Is there any last piece of advice or thing that you think people who are considering joining the military as an officer need to know before they get too much farther in their journey?
Do your research. Do your research. Don't take the first offer that's given to you. If you're in high school, think about the national scholarship, think about applying to the academy. There are so many different options and ways. And I think you need to think, what we don't do anymore is really early in people's lives, high school age time, is where do you want to be 5 years from now? If your 5-year plan lines up better with this program or this experience, then start really researching to make sure. Don't just assume, don't just take what you're hearing from some people. You could call 3 different ROTC programs and get 3 different pieces of information, right? Really do the research, reach out to somebody who knows and is passionate about it and wants to get you the correct way without calling you a number and hoping that you join their program. Like, find people that are truly interested in your best interests and want to assist you in getting where you truly want to be in 5 years. I mean, that's all you have to look forward is 5 years. Don't be thinking 10 years, 20 years, because everybody's plans change. But find a program, find an organization that matches your way forward, and then really do the research so you understand what you're stepping into. Talk to people at the program, especially if it's ROTC based. Talk to people at the different schools, talk to the cadre, do the appointments, do the interviews, do everything you can to feel as comfortable in your decision so that you're not 3-4 years later regretting it or wishing that you had just done a little bit more research.
Yeah, for sure. I wrote a book called A Girl's Guide to Military Service, and I tried to put as much information as I could. So if you don't have that, I'll put that in the show notes so that you can find it because it's a great
Yes,
resource.
please.
Yeah. So, yeah. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being a guest, a few months ago, and now for doing this interview as well. So thank you so much for being on the
Thank
show.
you. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it. It was fun.